Start my speech. I didn't think of myself that Jim and I have known each other for more than 40 years. We've been friends for more than 40 years. But we haven't always agreed with each other. I mean, we've disagreed on strategy. Occasionally, we've even disagreed on tactics. But I'll tell you one thing. We've always agreed and been absolutely united in the idea that there should be a strategy. Even if we disagree with what that strategy should be. Because one thing's for sure, if you don't have a strategy, if you have no idea what you're doing, then you're going to inevitably fail. There are in life, in politics, in sport, no doubt, many happens chances that outsiders win. I saw there was a 151 shot, one at Royal Ascot week past. And that can happen, lightning can strike. But trust me, in politics, there has been no success for any national movement in history unless they embark on a strategy. Merely having a strategy doesn't guarantee you success, but having a total absence of strategy absolutely guarantees failure. And Jim is correct. Where his party, and therefore by extension the national movement is at the present moment, is a total strategic vacuum. And what I want to say tonight is what we should do about it. You see, between Marjorie, Tasmina, Jim, and myself, if we also collectively invested, I hope that is too much. I have to say this at a wee Alba book meeting, but is there a doctor in there? Can I get one for them? So, between us, we've got, in my calculation, well over a century, damn near 2 centuries of personal, political investment in this cause. And none of the substantially less. Small contribution to the bicentennial. But I'm sure all 4 of us will be damned if we're going to see that effort dissipated for no good reason. Because if you look reasonably at the political landscape, the landscape is more propitious for Scottish independence than at any point in history. Not just because we have a largely politicised population, which despite the best efforts of the SNP Green government, is still politicised, by and large, from the experience of 2014. And also we have, and this is crucial, and Jim is one of the few speakers in Scotland who consistently points to it, we have to regard what's happening to our opponents. The British state has never, in modern history, been in a weaker condition. This is the moment. I mean, look, I dealt with Cameron and Osborne. I mean, I didn't think that David Cameron was Einstein by any means. He actually said to one of his cabinet colleagues who confided in me, they're a loyal bunch. I said, David says he's not going to meet you anymore. He's going to have you meet George Osborne instead. You know, who's a clever beast. He said, because David says every time you go into Downing Street, you come away with a silver. I don't actually think he meant that I stole the spoons. But he determined, as he was puzzled out the effect of the meeting some minutes afterwards, whenever he decided to do it at the beginning, that somehow he'd been outmaneuvered. I don't claim any fantastic success for that, because as I say, he was no Einstein, but he was clever enough to have Osborne do his thinking for him. Then compared to what has gone and come since, and come and gone since,
Almost.
departure. And it's only 7. I've lost count of the chancellors, I've lost count of the prime ministers. I was on a programme yesterday, I checked it beforehand, about the National Health Service in England, and I pointed out that there had been 6 Secretaries of State for Health in the last 4 years. So we're talking about a UK state which is in a decrepit,
Each of them sticking their finger in the pie. Each of them sticking their finger in the pie.
To an energized, effective national movement with a strategy. I want to mark the 3 moments, and well, I was going to say, maybe not living memory, but looking around this way is tonight, probably within living memory, in terms of Scottish politics. 3 seminal moments that really matter, that took us to where we still are today, despite the best laid schemes of the SNP Green Coalition. And that's first in 1967, and I brought Stop the World, the autobiography of Winnie Ewing along with me. Incidentally, I'm doing the eulogy. I'm deeply privileged to be doing the eulogy next week in Inverness Cathedral. And I thought I'd better get a hold of the autobiography. And I know I've got one, but you know, my study, I go through some books that not necessarily in exact order. Okay, I can't believe my figures on it. I looked up the online possibilities, and I found that Amazon were offering one for 126 quid. But luckily, I had a brainwave and I phoned Fraser, who works for Joanna Cherry, and I wondered if we'd get the Commons Library edition for me. I didn't steal the spoons from Harry. I've got the Commons Library edition of Stop the World. Scotland wants to get on. Now, the remarkable Winifred Margaret Ewing, her by-election victory in 1967 was a seminal moment in Scottish politics. It's the moment of modern Scottish politics when the SNP started to mount a serious challenge to the political status quo. And it's important, of course, because it had an effect. It panicked Harold Wilson into the Brandon Commission. It even panicked Ted Heath to go at Perth and announced the starting ranks of the Conservative and Unionist Party that they'd been long-term home rulers. And the Tory faithful looked up themselves and their carers at Ted Heath saying, trying to remember back long enough, and of course what Ted was trying to say was they were descended from the Jacobites. And the Tory party had been Jacobite friendly back in the 18th century, which is why the assembled throng in Perth Town Hall couldn't quite memorise when the Conservative Party had back home rule for Scotland. But even Ted Heath, as opposition leader, was panicked by Winnie Ewing's victory. And since 1967, there's been very few occasions when Westminster commentators have laughed at Scottish aspirations. I'll tell you, they're laughing now. They are laughing. The second moment, seminal moment, it was the victory of this man here in November 1988 in Dublin. Now we've had great victories, not least in Dublin, with Jim's late wife, Margaret MacDonald, a remarkable lady in 1973. But that moment in 1988 was important because of the consequences. And the consequences, just as Winnie Ewing's victory in 1967, panicked Harold Wilson, the Conservative and the Labour parties had talked about some form of home rule. 1988 panicked the Labour Party in Scotland into moving through the Constitutional Convention. The argument that somehow you could say just no to Scottish nationalism, not bend to Scottish aspirations, was finished by that victory in November 1988. When the SNP demonstrated that it hadn't been the majority opinion in the party, it had been the opinion of Jim Summers and Alec Salmond and Alec Neil and Stephen Maxwell and a number of others, that by identifying the SNP on the social economic spectrum, who could moment that was critical was the 2007 Scottish election victory. People forget that, and this is a real message. Perhaps the leadership of the SNP, I saw one of them say the other day that you had no rabbits to pull out of a hat. If you can't do conjuring tricks as a political leader, you shouldn't be on the stage. Pushing a rabbit out of a hat. It was 2007. We won the election, we won 47 seats. The Labour Party had 46. We had no right, beyond some democratic logic, to be running the Scottish Parliament. We had a grand total of 50 MSPs, 47 SNP, 2 Greens, 1 Marty MacDonald, who was probably worth the other 49. That's a total of 50 in a parliament of 129. That leaves 79 unionists. And yet we ended up running the show. And we ran the show because I appeared in Edinburgh, this capital city, where Jack McConnell was working somewhere, drowning his sorrows in wishful, to say, well, folks, I can't say it's clear who's won the election, but it's very clear who's lost the election. And therefore we have the democratic right to assume the government of Scotland. Usually rabbit out of a hat and turned a stalemate into victory. That's the job of political leaders. So these 3 moments, that moment of course led to the 2011 victory, to the referendum campaign, to turning support for independence from say 30% to 45%, and where Jim says, and rightly says, more or less where it is now. I think the last 15 polls I looked at yesterday, it's 48%. As Jim rightly says, it's not a majority. But it's hugely more than it was when we embarked on the referendum campaign in 2012 through the Edinburgh Agreement. So I'll go through this recent history for a purpose. And that's just to say what is to be done now. Because embarked on the present course, the SNP are going down to defeat in next year's general election. I'm a science fiction. A fiction. Not as much as some folk I've known in the SNP. Rosanna Cunningham, formidable politician, used to have a cardboard copy of Mr. Spock in a flat closet. I used to think it must give an inspiration. But I love science fiction. And I particularly love these movies where a spaceship is perched on the event horizon. There's actually a movie called Event Horizon. This spaceship, Event Horizon, is that thing on the edge of a black hole. But you're either going to escape if you turn your ship in the right fashion and stick out every thrust in your gut, or you're going to be sucked into oblivion if you don't, and probably end up in an alternative universe with Star Trek and Mr. Spock with his cardboard cuttings or Rosanna Cuttings. Who knows? The SNP are on the event horizon at the present moment. It's not too late to save it, and we might wonder what you do as leader of Alba, having the ability to tell the SNP to say, well, right enough, in my mood, I'm not hugely invested in the personal futures of the leadership of the Scottish National Party. I'm sorry to say that, I'm going to be honest, I'm not. But I'm hugely personally invested in the future of the national movement in Scotland. And I know if the SNP goes down to crushing defeat next year, then it will be a setback for the national movement. And the sniggers in London of the polls. But independence is still at 48% of the polls. That you attach yourself to the 48%, not to the 30%. Now you don't want to put off any of the 30%. But you want to say to the folk who believe in independence, we're going to have an election which prioritises what you believe in. And of course that carries with it a substantial benefit that allows you not to talk about the trials and tribulations of the SNP or the policy failures of the SNP government, but talk about the principle of Scottish independence. And you do that by reducing the rabbit out the hat of saying we're not going to fight this just in a conventional political party sense. We're going to fight it Scotland United for independence. Because we unionists vote tactically to stop nationalist MPs. There's an MP in this city of Edinburgh whose only saving grace is he claims to be a heart of the Midlothian supporter, who's only there and has survived since 2015 on the back of Tory votes, because the Tory ladies don't see any trouble in giving Mr Murray the vote to keep out these awful SNP tax. So if the Tories could put aside their historic differences with the Labour Party, whatever they might be, and to say preserving the Union, is it not possible that the nationalists could put aside our differences for the sake of pushing independence forward at next year's election? So it carries the support of 48%. It allows you to deflect, because believe me, you know, the SNP trials and tribulations are not going to go away by Christmas. And the track record, even if Humza turns out to be a master policy manipulator and the most efficient First Minister in the history of the Scottish Parliament, I can see you thinking that would be ever. You're not going to come round the very substantial disappointments that there have been over the last few years. And I'm not blaming Humza for any of these, it's just a fact. And you'll have noticed that Humza quietly is starting to try and ditch some of the silliness of the last wee while. The bottle scheme is no more. It's all the fault of Alistair Jack apparently. The fishing ban has been put into the ether. Good! The only problem is that instead of declaring that as a deliberate act of policy to say, look, what's gone before was before, I'm the new First Minister, I'm going to have a different direction, we're sort of crawling away from it issue by issue, and the trouble is there's a lot of issues left, not least of which is the unbuilt ferries sitting in the River Clyde. So therefore, even if Humza turns out to be great, and I'm hoping this, even if it turns out to be great, it's going to take a wee bit of time before the memories of all these policy disasters are dispelled. Therefore, don't fight the Westminster election on the back of the recent SNP green track record in the Scottish Government. Give yourself time to get the ship in the water and get your government back on course. Fight the election on the principle of Scottish independence. Now, I used to say when I come to this bit, in the Alba meetings recently, I said, look, the vast majority of these seats would be contested by the sitting SNP MPs. But of course, that statement is not as big a promise and commitment as it was a few years ago. I have to amend it to say the vast majority of these seats should be fought by the sitting SNP MPs who are still left at the time of the election. In most cases, all the seats held by the SNP should be fought by the SNP, at least 10. seats to be fought by the Scottish Greens. Now you may take that from my remarks and you would be right, that my estimation of the Green Party in Scotland and its commitment to Scottish independence is not sky high. But nonetheless, if you're fighting a Scotland united for independence, the whole point is you've got to bury the hatchet in order to defeat the Unionists. That is the whole point. If we look at history, these were people, true Scottish folk. I've spoken about Bruce and Wallace, Loyal Wallace, the hero King Robert Bruce, as if they were on the same side. Internally in Scotland, they weren't they? But they had the sense that it was right to know they had to combine and unite if they were going to survive the war of independence. It was tragic as did, of course. But he knew that, and he did his damnedest to do it. And Bruce knew it as well. But they disliked the difficulties. Don't mind you, Bruce bumped off Common, of course, so that helped them honestly. But nonetheless, they knew you had to bury your differences, as well as some of your opponents, in order to fight against the common enemy if you wanted to win. Because they had a strategy for winning. Now Bruce, of course, who was an aristocrat, did not do what David Wallace was a wonderful and amazing thing to emerge from the minor landed gentry, to command an army, which is some aristocrats in it. And he was always trying to fight pitched battles. Well, Bruce realised this, pitched battles might not be a great idea. Because he realised to win, you had to unite, and you had to be dedicated, and you had to have a strategy. So, despite my difficulties with the Scottish Greens, I would want them to be part of Scotland United for independence. And maybe one or two seats for the Scottish Socialist Party, why not? Maybe against being money. So I think about. And then I see for perhaps one of the many well-known independent people beyond party politics. If we did that, we would have a chance of avoiding a setback for the national movement next year. No more than a chance. Because it's not enough just to bring up on these. You've got to campaign for it, to believe in it, you've got to think about it, you've got to persuade the people. But at least as a track record of doing this, in Quebec in 1993, the Bloc Quebec was formed. When the Parti Québécois was in difficulties, was running the provincial administration, the Bloc Quebec merged and swept the boards at the federal elections. It can be done if the will is there to do it. And what's the alternative? The alternative is to allow the Labour Party to get back into the leading position in Scottish politics. It took Jim and I more than a quarter of a century to remove them from that position. Are we really just going to say, come back in, you take over and do nothing to deserve it? Keir Starmer isn't got an idea in his head. Are we actually going to allow the most boring opposition leader in both Westminster and in the Scottish Parliament I've ever seen to sweep the boards because the national parties can't get their act together and do something about it? For goodness sake, every single one of them should be tweeting all the folk that haven't blocked you, Alba. Skipping them to get behind the Scotland United cause. It's not for the good of Alba, not for the good of Alexander, not even for the good of the SNP MPs, but for the good of Scotland. So that we do not allow our Unionist opponents to ride roughshod over our aspirations next year. Now I know there's some folk, I know this absolutely. Close to Hamza, we say, comes up, we can lose 20 seats. Because the expectations are so low. That won't be a fatal setback. We'll just lose 20 seats and then we'll come riding back at a Scottish election. Politics doesn't work like that.
No, it certainly doesn't.
It just doesn't. The momentum's for you, and it's against you. the last 8 years, not least in Glasgow Green at the coronation just a few weeks ago. Incidentally, the pretended coronation in Edinburgh. Well, I've had another hours, I'll tell you what's wrong with that story. But just let me say this. We actually have something of deep symbolic historic importance in the sword of Scotland, given to James IV by Pope Julius, the warrior Pope, in 1507, to try and encourage him to help him fend off other armies in Italy. James IV was intelligent enough not to do that. Unfortunately, decided to go to Florence some years later, but never mind about that. It is a magnificent piece of history, which would have cost £200 to get into condition, and believe me, I mean, it's been broken before. It's broken to get away from Cromwell's new. The idea that what you must do is spend £22,000 in producing a new sword of Scotland to give to King Charles, who incidentally is not short of swords. It's ridiculous. And whoever thought of that should get to the back of the class, and any minister who signed off that travesty should resign immediately. In this case, I don't think we can blame one of the Green ministers. I think it must have been one of the SNP ones. You know, we are in a situation where people might say, I mean, no disrespect to the craftsmen, the craft women who did it, I'm sure they're brilliant. But it's not necessary, it's not historic, it's not reasonable, and the cost of living crisis is totally ridiculous. In the Diamond Jubilee, I gave much degree, no, I had the highest regard for her Diamond Jubilee from the people of Scotland. I gave her a digitalised version of the 1911 census of Balmoral. She spent hours poring over because she recognised the names from childhood, the families in the Balmoral estate. It cost us in this church, if I remember correctly, £208. And she told me it was the best present she got in the entire Diamond Jubilee. Because you don't have to give people diamonds or encrusted swords to be well thought of. You just have to pay attention to your history, tradition, and what people might think. And remind everybody concerned that the whole aspect, I'm fully endorsing, as you know, electing head of states, the way forward has to be reforming a new country. But if you're a Scottish monarchist, you might want to have a situation where you pay attention to the history of the country and have a king who takes it off to the people as opposed to vice versa. Which is what the Archbishop of Canterbury suggested, if you remember, in the coronation dynasty. So we have to have a national movement, independent political parties, not subsumed into any political party. We have emerged with some strengths since 2014. We've got in Commonweal a think tank that produces amazing policies. We've got people who research currency, we've got people who research sovereignty. These organisations should bring together so they don't duplicate themselves and keep that strength and that vitality and that independence separate from the government of the day, which is really important, so they can be mobilised in Scotland's benefit. So last, if we embark on the Scotland United for Independence route, then we've got a fair chance of moving forwards instead of backwards. On a manifesto that demands to negotiate independence from our country from Westminster. If that doesn't happen, then I'm sure at the next Scottish elections, where of course it's not first past the post, and challenges should be welcomed on the list from a variety of national parties. And I'm quite certain that that more assertive form of democratic observance from the national movement will emerge. But you have to prepare yourselves and the people for that world where Scotland says yes and England continues to say no. conference, in historic times, you know, historical terms, that's not bad, that's not bad. But we're not huge and we're not rich. But we managed to commission an opinion through the good offices of Neil Hanvey MP from Robert McCorkindale, which illustrates some of the world's premier international lawyer, the favoured lawyer of the United Nations, the person who's advised everybody from the Chagos Islanders to the Baltic states, the idiocy of the Supreme Court's questioning or attempt to roadblock self-determination. Why do you need that? Because you have to have the ammunition. You have to have the intellectual firepower so that people know what they're doing is legitimate, right, and just. People don't have to read the full opinion to know in their hearts and their guts that Scotland's a real nation and real nations have the right to self-determination, and another country cannot veto that right. Do that because we know that when the majority is there, not as Jim rightly says, slipping in an election, but the majority is there, then the political class have to know what they do to force Westminster's hand. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not easy, but it's not impossible. How do I know it's not impossible? Because in my term as a member of Parliament, I met the representatives, the High Commissioners of 50 countries which have become independent from Westminster since the Second World War. Some big, some small, some rich, some poor, some with trouble, some who are making great advances. The common factor in every single one of these representatives is not one of them wanting to go backwards. And the other common factor is in very few occasions did Westminster and Whitehall say, come and take your independence. On the contrary, they had to have a resolution, steel in their character, iron in their soul, and the ability